This is the Thursday edition of The Next Right Thing. I say this every single Thursday. We love the luminous mysteries, the mysteries of light. And we hope everyone is praying the rosary on a daily basis. Very, very powerful. You talk about that's the best deliverance prayer, Adam. And we're going to actually talk about that right now, about is there too much deliverance ministries and prayers and all sorts of programs out there. Talk to us about this, Adam, because this is important. We're hearing more and more podcasters coming out saying that we've got to somewhat, keep some of these priests, these celebrity exorcists in check a little bit, because this is getting, it's getting a bit extreme, actually. So let's talk about it.
Well, Deb, and yeah, it's not my intention to put anybody in check myself. I want to share kind of the history of where the church traditionally, if you can want to use that word, I know it's a loaded word, but the kind of traditional approach to the exorcism ministry in terms of the public that we've had. So I've been involved in this world for about 20 years, right? And when I was being kind of pulled into this, there was no exorcist podcasters. There was just the movie The Exorcist and the other trashy Hollywood horror films that tried to portray that, but they weren't super popular. It was kind of out there, but nobody thought it still actually happened in the modern world, or most people didn't. Well, here's this phenomenon that I've been observing now for the last 5 to 10 years. And that is, as the ministry is coming back, and the Holy Spirit is bringing the ministry back. It's never really died out in South America. It never really died out in Italy. But it's really coming back in the rest of the Western world. Okay. We're seeing a big shift. In the past, Deb, exorcists were not known. You didn't know who the exorcist in your diocese was. I met an exorcist early on from a major archdiocese here in the United States. He was already older at the time, and he's gone to the Lord now for quite a while. So he's passed on, right? When I met him, he had been the only exorcist in this huge archdiocese for about 45 years. He was the Lone Ranger, as far as he knew. And he said, I don't know if there's any others because they don't tell me, but I think I'm the only one. And he had been doing it for 45 years. He wasn't allowed to even tell other priests that he was the exorcist. The priests that he was living with in his religious community, they suspected he was, but he couldn't tell them. They didn't know for sure. Isn't that amazing compared to today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a lesser degree, Adam, for years, my spiritual director, I had no idea he was one of our diocesan exorcists. I had no idea. He never let on ever that he was. Mm-hmm. So I'm right with you on that. That for so many, I mean, that what you described was a big example. But even in my life, I didn't know and I worked at the parish level in my diocese for 25 years. We didn't know who the exorcists were.
Right.
So why all of a sudden do we know everyone's an exorcist?
Well, I think a good question to meditate on is, why did the church in her wisdom, after 2,000 years of experience, come to the conclusion that it's better that the exorcism ministry be a quiet and anonymous ministry as opposed to being open to the public? The church learns these things through hard experience. So there was a wisdom in keeping that ministry quiet, not because there was shame or to hide anything from people, but let's get into why that might have been. Now, another thing that relates to this, and I just want to touch on it quickly, in the actual rite of exorcism, in the older rite of exorcism, the one from 1614, in the introductory instructions, there's an instruction there to the bishop who's going to choose his exorcist. And it says a few things. They should be older, they should be very stable, well-known, known for piety. And one of the traits that's described, it says he must be completely free of any desire for self-aggrandizement. Aggrandizement's a fancy word for appearing more important than you actually are.
Right.
So the exorcist needs to be humble and reserved and stable and quiet, basically. Okay. Now, in the modern situation, if we skip ahead, 20 years, now we've got a few hundred at least exorcists that have been trained in the United States. We had around 20, maybe 25 in the whole country 20 years ago. Now we've got a ton. A handful, a very small handful, are known to the public. And the public kind of gets the impression, because they see a lot from a few priests, that, oh, these are the guys. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm not picking on them at all. In fact, I'm friends with just about everybody. I know just about everybody. 99% of the exorcists that are out there working every week and are trained up and duly appointed and all of that, they don't give interviews. You're never going to know their name. They don't do blogs. They don't talk about it.
They're not on social media.
They're not on social media, none of it. Mm-hmm. And people, they kind of almost become a fan of some priests and kind of imagine that they're like the only ones, or they're the super important one. Another funny thing to take our whole country down a peg in terms of the self-aggrandizement. Over in Rome, when I first started going to the international meetings of the association over there, they considered all the Americans to be upstarts. They said, if you guys have 15 years under your belt, you're a beginner.
Wow.
They didn't think you were seasoned and experienced till 30, 40 years under your belt. So they would consider everybody here to be beginners, not advanced masters at all. So there's a very different perspective from the old guys in Rome that have done this 8 hours a day, every day for 30 or 40 years. There's a whole other level of experience. Okay. Why would the church kind of conclude that it's best to not share the details of this ministry with the public? There's a couple analogies you could use. I don't know if this analogy works for you, Deb, let me know. But if we think of a surgeon, a specialist. So, we might see a YouTube video of a brain surgeon talking about some complex surgery they have to do to save a person's sight, given that they had this damage or they had this, maybe a cyst or a tumor or something. And we kind of understand what they're saying, right? And we might even imagine that we understand it pretty well. And we might even fantasize like, oh, that doesn't look so hard. Maybe with a little training, I could do that too. Not as big a deal as I thought it was. And I might kind of run with that and jump to some conclusions and combine it with what I do know. Now, I don't know next to anything about brain surgery, really. I'm not even a medical doctor. But I watched a documentary on brain surgery, and now I kind of think I know what's going on. Mm. Do I? Would you want me to do brain surgery on you?
No.
like not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Would anybody reasonable want me to do brain surgery on them? And nor would I, by the way. Mm-hmm. Well, when we watch these things, we can get the illusion that we know more than we really do, because we tend to fill in the gaps with our imagination. When exorcists give interviews and they share these stories, the problem there is, as opposed to saying, well, you haven't even gone to med school, let alone understand the brain. When we hear the stories from the exorcists, using this analogy, we don't even have a proper theological foundation to understand what they're talking about, to understand the implications of the stories. The stories are fascinating, but we hear that oh, well, a demon told Father this about hell or about Genesis or something from the Bible. Mm-hmm. We don't have the theological foundation to know, number one, demons lie. It's almost all lies, whatever they said. We know you're not supposed to trust them. We know that whatever truth they did tell was to distort your understanding of the Bible and try to attack your faith in God. If you knew all that, you'd be able to hear that story in a different light. But for the average person in the public, we don't have all that background. The brain surgeon kind of talks about it with the kind of assumption that this is normal. To them it is. And there's a lot of background knowledge. that they presume that at least, you have a little bit of. When an exorcist talks, or people like myself who train exorcists, been doing this a long time, unless we give you a footnote and fill in a ton of stuff and qualifiers and amplifications on words and exegesis of words, unless we do that for every sentence that comes out of our mouth, you're not going to fully understand what we're talking about.
It's interesting. Well, and let me go back to the beginning. When I was sharing that it's not. I mean, we're not saying this on radio. I'm saying that there's podcasters out there right now saying that there's some newer exorcists on the speaking circuit, and they're giving interviews, and that's what they were referring to. That they're not quite sure. It's not consistent with what some of the highly respected, popular exorcists that are out there are saying. So you've got even the exorcists not quite saying. I mean, when there's no consistency there, and then it's like, well, which exorcist do you believe? And so that's what the podcasters are saying. This is getting a little bit out of control in the sense that there's not a set kind of catechesis on this, on what to expect from this type of work. So Adam, would you address that when we come back? Because when you have these inconsistencies, how do we know who to believe? Let's hold it there. Okay, we're talking about this rise of celebrity exorcists and what it means for us as the lay faithful, as we are listening to these very well respected priests that are sharing, some really important information, trying to help us to be on the path to sainthood and to really avoid a temptation and really go deeper with God. But that I was sharing earlier, that some podcasters are saying that this is getting a little bit, strange, because not everybody is agreeing on different things that the demons say, don't say. What should we believe, not believe? What kind of prayers should we say? I mean, it's really getting confusing for the regular folk. What do you say to that, Adam?
Well, here's the thing, Deb. And again, this is after, 20 years, and I've been at thousands of exorcisms with many different exorcists, and mostly in the States, but in other countries also. And I've talked with innumerable exorcists and chatting in between things at conferences. These are the private conferences and whatnot. Not everybody has come to the same conclusions, Deb. It's not an exact science. You have the book, so you know the words you're supposed to say, and there's a few things you're supposed to do. Put the stole on the person's head, or touch them with the crucifix, maybe on their head or their shoulder, or some people like to use holy water. There's very little that's called for that you definitely need to do. So what happens is, over time, over the years, you develop your own style, your own approach. Some people like to use the relics of the saints. We do all the time. That's not in the book. It's not required. It doesn't say you can't do it, but it's not required. Well, what about the interrogations? What's your name? How did you enter this person? When are you leaving? Those are in the book with the exact words that you are supposed to, the priest is supposed to say to the demon. But in the introduction it says, and you can ask other questions that are relevant to solving the case and getting the demon out. You're not allowed to ask questions that are irrelevant, like how many demons are in hell, or what was it like before the fall, or any other conversational dialogue you are not allowed to enter into. You're only allowed to try to help this human being that has come to the church for prayer. Okay? Anything else is curiosity, and the demon does not have to tell you the truth. God won't force them to, because you've stepped into curiosity, and you're now asking a demon for a favor by saying, tell me some secrets. So, again, people end up developing their own style. A little bit. Everybody still uses the book, still reads the words. But they might, pause and pray a decade of the rosary, and somebody else might really like to use this relic of this saint, and they invoke that saint and ask for their help during the sessions. Mm-hmm. Other people really like the St. Michael stones, and they like to jump out and do the minor exorcism, the Leo the 13th, which is the expanded St. Michael prayer. Okay. And then there's slight, lack of agreement on certain finer points related to all of this. Like, can you demand the choir from which that angel fell? Is that useful? Is it needed to help that soul, to help this person? Or is it extraneous information that you don't need, and so it should be avoided? Some people think that that's useful, and they find it useful in their ministry. And so what you see, Deb, over the years is people develop a little bit of their own approach to this and a little bit of their own understanding, and here's partly why. The Bible doesn't give us every little detail about angels or demons. Thomas Aquinas tried to extrapolate out and fill in as much as he could, but we still don't have all the information.
Right.
Yeah, we just don't have all the information.
Right.
And so you end up trying to figure out some of those things yourself. And so given that there's different people doing this, you come to different conclusions.
Okay, but Adam, how much of this is beneficial to us as the faithful? I mean, do we really have to know this stuff? I mean, I understand that some of these priests want to really help us, and there's like, stay away from this, stay away from that. But is it real? I think it's going to get confusing for us.
This is just my take. I'm not saying I've got the answer. This is just my take. You should learn enough to stay away from the traps. Okay, learn enough about the enemy to avoid the traps, so you avoid getting in these rare and extraordinary problems.
Okay.
But don't dive into this and make it your life. So here's where it goes off the rails. And I've seen this quite a bit.
Are you going to go into deliverance prayers? Because that's what we're hearing a lot about.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So there's a real misunderstanding that happens. People get really into these watching podcasts about exorcism and maybe heavy deliverance too. And they start, you put on tinted glasses and you see the whole world that way, right? So I put on my purple glasses and everything looks purple. If I get into this material too much, I start seeing everything in those terms. And so you start hearing like, oh, my addiction means that I'm possessed and I need an exorcism. Or I've got to say tons of these special protective litanies every morning before I start my day. Or something terrible is going to happen to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or Satan is going to take over my body because I woke up with scratches and so I need to say this litany or he's going to get me. Or the person starts living their life in fear of demons around every corner, under every stone, instead of trusting in Jesus and his love. And we saw this actually with the question we had on the spirit world. Somebody was, and I'm not blaming them, but they were really hung up on the question of, well, does the rosary affect the demons a lot? Is it a good deliverance prayer in that sense? Is it like the right thing that's going to hit the demons hard? And what we were trying to get across on the show was the rosary, first and foremost, is a prayer of love and thanksgiving to Christ for salvation, to Mary for her role, exploring the scriptures. It's a prayer to God. Secondarily, yes, it's a wonderful deliverance prayer.
Yeah,
but
it's very powerful.
Yeah, but if you turn it into, oh, this is, I'm not saying they were saying this, but you could take it to the point where you say, well, this is a weapon against demons.
Or I have to say the rosary in order to protect myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and the saddest form of this is when the deliverance approach has taken over their whole spiritual life. I've seen this with some people.
Well, okay.
It becomes an obsession.
Well, and let me just share this because you're not on social media, but if you were to just scroll and just casually go through some religious different podcasts and smaller snippets of material out there on the internet, you'll see just probably half a dozen a day. It's unbelievable of how many are leading deliverance prayers in different ways for different reasons. It's unbelievable. I've never seen it before like that, where you can catch a priest, doing an internet deliverance session.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with deliverance prayers, but I think everybody kind of sees these problems, if you want to call them that they're having, as extraordinary demonic problems that need heavy, powerful deliverance prayers to deal with them, versus the regular life of virtue, the sacramental life, trusting in God, focusing on your walk with God. All of that is actually really, really important. Okay, So kind of the bottom line is, I don't think anybody intended for these misunderstandings to develop in the public. The exorcists don't intend that. They are trying to be helpful. I'm trying to be helpful in what we share.
Yeah, they want us to get to heaven. Go ahead.
But we need to back off a bit on focusing on deliverance. Remember Luke 10:20. Nevertheless, do not rejoice because the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice because your names are written in heaven. We need
Amen.
more God, more Jesus, more love, and more trust.
Well said.
Thank you for listening to The Next Right Thing with angel specialist Debbie Georgianni and religious demonologist Adam Blai. Debbie and Adam are daily contributors to the live radio program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey every weekday on the Guadalupe Radio Network. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.